right. Well, I think we should kick things off because this is the time of the session.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. Let's just give it a moment, see if anyone's coming in.
I do not know how to tell that. I'm still learning.
All right, well, let's kick things off. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending today's session. Today, we will be talking about how to accelerate revenue with better product storytelling. My name is Kimara Moodley. I go by Kim for short, and I'm a senior account executive at DemoStack. And we're a brand new technology in the pre-sales world. So we are a tech that helps with creating demos and allowing you to create a full demo environment within our platform. Go ahead, Mara. I'll let you do it.
My name is Mara. I'm a principal value stream architect at a company called TaskTop. So we actually historically were an integration software, but now we sell value stream management, a whole value stream management platform for kind of traditional businesses and large enterprises. So that's our kind of target market.
Great. So you're a value stream architect for a value stream management platform. Seems like there's a lot of focus on communicating value. Can you tell me a little bit more about how communicating value impacts your business as a whole?
Absolutely. So I think that one of the most interesting things that I've learned in the last few years, especially as our company has grown, released the second product, is that for us right now, it's not just communicating value, but it's also communicating the vision of the product. So we've gone from selling sort of middleware product that we would sell to like a tools team to a complete executive sale, which means that we're not there just to prove out a value in one session. We're there to actually show the executive the vision of the product and how the product can help them move the needle on whatever, their job is, however it can help their day-to-day. And just understand, like we just have to help them visualize it and help them understand a little more than just the pure value of the product.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like you need to connect the product and what the software does to KPIs and OKRs so that it's more value focused, right?
Yes, because that's the higher level sale, right? Like when an executive are selecting software or selecting what bets to take for their organization, they are ultimately taking them to essentially move the needle for them, whatever is their, bonus structure or whatever drives their day-to-day. And it's typically OKRs and KPIs and anything that drives their decision making and essentially guidance and governance.
Yeah. So let's dive into communicating value in the sales process specifically. Obviously, your customers need to understand the value of the product in order to buy it. How do you think about telling the right product story in your demos?
Yeah, so one of the things that I talked a lot to all of my teams about, like all of the teams in our company, is the idea of perspectives and angles. So, maybe previously it was simple to just show up to a demo and showcase what the product does. Yeah. And that's great. And then you made the sale. But I think we're in a world where if you show up to a meeting and you show a demo that doesn't really hit the angle for the particular role and persona, you're potentially really missing the mark and losing the audience. And it is very, very, the attention span for people these days is so short that we really have to understand the pain points. And like I said, the perspective, the day-to-day role that each of these humans have and how the product fits into that, like really understand kind of deeply their day-to-day, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a pretty similar experience, even though I've sold multiple different types of technology. Every time I'm in a sales cycle, I'm talking to so many different people in the same sales cycle. So it's like if I have to tell the same story over and over again, it doesn't quite hit home. So I try to focus more on use cases and personas and what they would think is value in the product itself. So not just feature selling, which, back in the day, maybe I used to do a little bit of, but I think now it's become more about how can they see value and how is it going to impact the business, whether it's revenue or cost. There's a lot of ways to take a look at that.
Yes. And I think that another thing, especially for us, and I think this applies to a lot of different softwares out there, is that we also sell to different levels of the organization. So that means that our story and the demonstrations and the kind of the visuals that we, not just the visuals, but like anything that we share with our customers, it has to fit all of the different levels. So we have to go in a meeting with, let's say, an executive and be able to speak their language and showcase how this is going to fit into their world and how this is going to help them. And then at the same time, maybe a week later, meet with delivery managers and engineering managers and somebody at a completely different level and be able to sell the same product, but tell a completely different story. And now you're actually like trying to convince somebody who's in a completely different level how the same product is going to fit into their day-to-day. So I think understanding the person, I mean, that's an age-long problem thing, right? Everybody's always taught us about understanding the personas and the buyers and everything, but I think it's more critical than ever because of how short people's attention spans is, and how how short of a time we have to really hit home with what it is that our product does and how it can help our customers.
Yeah, I'm coming from a world of doing this all through slides and kind of talking through everything in discovery calls. So I think it's really awesome that you're kind of attacking this whole age-old problem with product and trying to show it in your actual demo as opposed to doing slides and the legacy approach, if you will.
Yes, and I think there's an interesting thing that has happened for our team over the past like 6 months or so, is that we do the slide thing, right? We prepare slides, and I always have slides as a backup and various different slides. But I think there's something magical when you can show the product for each of the roles specifically, not just slides. And I find myself a lot, and with Demo Stack, that's exactly what we do, and that's exactly what we try to do. Is instead of having to show a slide and tell a customer, imagine the product doing this, we can actually show the product doing what I'm telling the customer to imagine. So I think it's such an amazing and kind of magical turn in how I think we're going to approach the sales and the different personas that we're talking to.
Yeah, it's almost like you're kind of bridging that gap between just vision selling and like the reality of which is the product. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Absolutely. How do you think tailoring the story helps your customers understand value faster?
So I think, there's the feature selling, which is great because when you have magical and amazing features, you can also still sell. But the storytelling is what, in my mind, generates your champions much faster. So if a person comes to a demo and comes to a conversation, and a demo is a very generic word, I think we should say any conversation, right? It doesn't have to be a scheduled demo for us to tell stories and use something like Demo Stack to tell stories. That every time that a customer shows up to a session with me, for instance, I think about it this way. I'm like, okay, now I've been given an hour to make this customer, this particular person, my champion, my new person that can actually envision using the product in their day-to-day. And I think that's where storytelling is absolutely critical, because if we're just going to focus on features and what the buttons do and what each of the different screens is telling us, then we're potentially going to lose somebody, and they're going to leave the room and they're going to think, yeah, it's kind of cool, but I don't see how it fits my world. It seems like they're mostly catering to executives, but I'm a QA manager. So what do I care about? So I think that's one of the other things that I a lot of times think about is like, okay, how can I work with all of these different people? And then when I'm not in the room, when I can't control the conversation and the narrative, when they're in the room without me, how can I make sure that conversation is preceding the sale and advancing my sale as well? And instead, one of them saying, yeah, cool software, but I'm on to my next thing that day. So I think we have to think about these things, because what people think in that first impression and that imagination of how this fits into their world is just absolutely critical in my mind.
Yeah, it's like you only have one chance to really make a first impression. So you want to go out the gates strong. So product, I think, is the coolest way to do that. And that's the biggest reason why I joined Demo Stack, because I wanted the ability to tell the story through product instead of spending hours on slides and things that I used to do in the past.
Yes, and I think another thing that this just actually made me think about is, there's that kind of traditional old school way of running sales cycles. You get on a little call, then you do a discovery, then you do another discovery, and then you do a demo. And I'm just like such an opponent of making somebody sit through 4 calls until you actually show them something that's worth their time. So I'm hoping that using things like Demo Stack and just like these tailored tailored stories, and just more controlled stories, even, right? Like even our account executives, not making, not even having like a technical pre-sales person on the line always, they can actually kind of start sprinkling some of those tidbits along the way, such that the customer doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I waited 4 hours until I get my demo, but they feel like it's a kind of a evolving conversation for them. And I think those sales cycles are so much more valuable. And I strongly believe that the land deal becomes much, much larger when you're not just selling features, but when you're actually selling to the personas and the people, and they can actually envision what they're going to do with it, and they keep championing it throughout the sales cycle, instead of spending like the 6 months of the sales cycle convincing that one person, right? That's a completely different situation that you will end up in.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think even if you have this sort of relationship and you've given them so much value through showing product at different levels within the organization, and you have these champions, even though your land is going to be really big, it likely will also affect your expansion as well, right?
Yes, incredible. So that's another big pet peeve of mine, that I'm on the pre-sale side of the world, so I am there to land the deals, but I always have in mind that expand. I always think about the customer, and a year flies by, like that, right? Like think about a year and a half ago, it was pre-COVID. So like imagine how fast, time goes. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, we are landing, but the expand, like how can I even work towards my land deal such that the expand is 10x, 20x, instead of maybe like, maybe 2x. So like how do we throughout the whole journey really focus on storytelling and convincing more and more people to envision what they're going to do with our product, and that, I mean, 100 times out of 100 leads to bigger lands and bigger expands in my mind.
Yeah. Would you say that tailoring and the product storytelling is something that follows into post sales as well, like outside of pre-sales?
Yes. So depending on the type of software that you sell, like I said, we used to sell just like kind of a middleware integration software, which typically was managed by a central team. So the expand was really just getting more teams on board to use the integration. Now we're in a situation where when we're going for enterprise customers, we might be starting with 500 people, but during that first year of doing the first year subscription or whatever, the pilot, whatever people want to use. I don't like the word pilot, but whatever word they use, my goal is that after the 500 people, they want to roll this out to 10,000, right? And that's where it's just another pre-sale. In my mind, it's as important to bring on board those new people and have them envision how this is going to help them. It's just, for us as salespeople, I think the successes of that first group is even better, even more ammunition. But we still have to be good at storytelling and tailoring the and I mean, demos are still relevant. Like I demo throughout the first few years of our engagements to work towards that expand deal, for instance. So it never goes away in my mind. And even implementing the product, like being able to show the customer that, okay, now you've bought it, and now, but here's your art of the possible, right? Like here's what you imagine what you could do with the product. Storytelling is always runs the world in my mind.
We actually had a pretty interesting question pop up in the chat here from Peter. And he's asking a little bit of a different kind of segue. So away from just product storytelling, but how do you storytell with services instead of products? And I think it kind of goes hand in hand. This goes back to, I think, what you mentioned about selling vision, which I do as well. I mean, I do this in my day-to-day at any company I've worked at, because you have to paint a picture of what this is going to be like future state once it's implemented and you're seeing value, which you can't always see right away through just product and features. So what would you say in regard to that?
So services, so we for instance are a product company, right? So we are selling a product, but getting the customer rolled on to the product and using the product takes services. It always takes coaching, it takes enablement. So we've been selling the newer product for about 2 years now, and in the past 9 to 12 months, I've learned how critical it is to tell the stories about what's going to happen post sale as well. So like it's not just it's not just the products and the features, but it's also, I can even imagine using demos and custom demos to explain what's going to happen in the sessions post sale. And that's kind of how I've actually talked to some of my customers. I bring up some sample demos and I say, okay, our coaches are going to sit down with you and do XYZ, and they're going to bring up this kind of screen and they're going to give you this kind of insight. So it's still about storytelling. It's still about taking that person, understanding their role, and then being able to paint a picture about what the post sale and the services is going to look like when they've actually, closed the deal. I think it's relevant at really any level, because people are very concerned with ambiguity and like not knowing what's coming. So the more you can paint that picture for your customers, whether it's services or products or both, I think the better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand, like I said, because even myself as a rep, I do follow my accounts into post sales as well as the account manager. Yep. And it is part of a service, right? You have to understand what your client is trying to achieve. And I think that extends beyond just the first use case, because once they're in and they're engaged in using the product, there's always different ways that they can use the product to their benefit, right? But depending on what the business is trying to do at that point in time. And I think that's where, through services and really listening and engaging with your customers and understanding what their drivers are in the business over time, that's where you can start to kind of storytell and get more money out of it too, in terms of expansion, getting them more engaged with more users and more product if you have a multi-product platform. So it still goes back to the tried and true, which is understanding who you're speaking to, whether it's through services or product. It's finding that story that appeals to that person and telling the right thing, giving the right narrative.
Yeah. And I've actually recently learned that a lot of people are scared of asking questions because they don't know what the answer is going to be. And as I work with a lot of our teams, whether they're pre-sales or post-sales implementation teams, I try to encourage people to, for you, Kim, maybe it's very easy to say, oh, just understand who you're talking to, because for you, it's very natural, right? But I think I meet a lot of people who are worried about asking questions because they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with the answer. So I think my kind of next step would be, you got to learn who you're talking to, but don't ever be scared to asking questions and actually learning about the customer, because they will definitely, tell you and talk about something that you don't know, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't learn about it, right? And that's the interesting thing. And people are typically very willing to share what their pain points are and what their daily struggles are. And that's really where you start building those key, success areas that the product and the sale can hit, in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. To your point, I love asking questions. So for me, it's not something that's foreign, but I definitely do have quite a few colleagues and friends that are a little bit more timid with asking questions, because of that fear. So that's something too. I think it's practice and building confidence and being able to really understand what your product can also do, or what your services can do in terms of impacting your customer's business or team. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about obstacles that you face when crafting the right product story. What comes to mind when you think about obstacles?
So one of our biggest obstacles recently has been, because our software is an analytics software, so it essentially sits on top of customers' data and extracts kind of a prescriptive way of thinking about analytics. Without going into details of that, what the problem for our demos and our sales cycles is that we don't have, unless we have data, which means customer data, we don't have good quote demo stories, right? We have to have real data to showcase the analytics. So of course there's ways to build, demolytics and build fake data and all of that, but we want our product team to focus on the features in the product instead of building ways to manipulate data. So one of the things, and one of the reasons actually how Kim and I are even, how we know each other, is because we were looking for a solution for having better data, to have better demos that tell better stories. It all goes hand in hand, but it all started with us not being able to really cater and customize the story. And as part of it, things like charts, right? If we're telling a story and demoing our product, I may have a completely different story when I'm talking, like I said, to an executive, or not even at that level. Let's say an engineering manager versus a QA manager. So I want the stories to be different, but we didn't have as much freedom and as much kind of fake data to have those stories. So that's like, that's been a massive obstacle in our world. And that's why we're, solving it now and working towards it.
I know. I think about this all the time because I have sold many tools that all have an analytics portal. And that is something that's very hard to craft a story around without changing underlying data. So it's something cool. Like if you could change what the visuals look like, the story naturally will progress or change based on what you get on the screen. So that's something that I think will be cool for you to do and help you out with your sales.
Yeah. And I think and there's a lot of different applications that I see for this. And one of the other things that, our obstacle is that if a customer wants to trial our software, they have to put it on top of their production data because otherwise it doesn't produce, meaningful data. So the other angle or the kind of side or the benefit that I'm seeing is also being able to give customers the ability to see relevant stories, but it just not being their data, right? But still us being able to, again, showcase what this might look like in their environment without us having to connect to their environment, right? Because we can't do that pre-legals and all that good stuff. But that's like another big thing that, I think is going to be super cool. And I'm very, very excited about.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about in terms of solving those problems, and what made DemoStack stand out to you?
So a couple of things I've already mentioned. So obviously not the fact that we don't have quote fake data or we don't have good demo data is the best way to put it. And our team is actually scaling. So, 5 years ago when I started in our pre-sales team, it was 4 of us. So everything was very centralized, very easy to do, very easy to update and sort of come up with. But now when it's 11, 12, and, we're growing as every quarter, it is extremely hard to do that quality control, right? It's very hard to have 12 people do the same exact demo and give the same exact stories to the customers when I can't, when they don't have the access to materials that can do that. So scaling is one of the big things. And then, like I said, good demo data scaling, and then just various different kind of access to demo stories is our sort of third big bucket. But I think those were the 3 things that were key issues for our team that made us start looking at DemoStack and other alternatives and obviously choose DemoStack ultimately. And super exciting.
Peter actually put another comment in here, which is so true. You have sales engineers who love building real demos to match a story, but it's kind of interesting when you think about the scale point that you brought up. Because I'm sure, as you've grown and evolved, you had, 4 folks on your team before, but likely the same kind of amount of account executives. And then that probably changes with scale. So how would you say this would help in that regard? Because this is definitely a tool that helps sales engineers like yourself, who's part of the pre-sales technical team. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you thought about this and helping you.
Yeah. So number one, the easiest one is that it gives me confidence that whenever, regardless of which of the pre-sales people any of our sales reps work with, it's gonna, like I said, a little bit of quality control, right? Like the confidence that our demos are the same. It doesn't, not like robotically the same, but that everybody has the same access to the same materials and custom stories. And I know that if one of my teammates in Germany, goes into a demo with an automotive company, they know to pull up the automotive stories, right? They have access to that same kind of set of materials that I do, versus now I might be, tap dancing and creating a slide in the background while my sales rep is like, smoking mirrors a little bit. So now essentially just knowing that everybody has access to the same stuff and materials and information. So that's kind of one of the big things that I can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have another question. Have you considered using custom videos or animations to help your storytelling?
We do. I mean, we're going to definitely use DemoStack for that. We're hoping that DemoStack helps us drive a lot more custom short stories that are recorded. We're very big believers of, after a session, sending over quick record a demo no more than like a minute, minute and a half, such that, as a, hey, FYI, here's the story we talked about on the call, right? So things like that. And that's absolutely one of the things where we're going to be using DemoStack to build like custom demos. And I think it's going to, without having to spend days building the custom environment and all of that craziness, we can just quickly create a new environment and adjust the words and everything and the metrics to match our story. So that's like a very, very big part of what we're trying to do.
I do think, I actually have used animations and videos in selling, like even in just outbound cold outreach via LinkedIn. It's always hit home. And this is in the past before I came over to DemoStack. I would make GIFs and kind of go into my product and tell stories that way. And it does work. So animations and videos do work. But, it takes it a step further when you can up level, and it's not just a video or a GIF, but actually access to a demo.
Yeah.
It's an application where you can actually play around with it and click it. So to your point, the leave behind where you're sending that after the sales call or after the sales engineer is introduced and you're on that second call with more of a custom demo, it's a good way for you to be able to give your prospect more access and understand whether they're even interested before going through the path of a more tailored proof of concept, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a world where, just like I said, imagine what happens in the room when you're not present, and imagine a world where you've run a great demo, you've had a great conversation, and you can follow up with a link and said, hey, if somebody is curious about what is this thing, right? Here's a quick instance where you can show the same story I showed you. Now your story is, amplified and told 75 more times potentially. So that's I'm very much looking forward to seeing how we can apply that, especially with the product that we sell.
Yeah, and then even putting like demos on a website and being able to get people to access this content without even coming to sales first, it kind of tees up your pipeline a little bit. So then those folks that come into a sales cycle have a bit more education, but it's not like a general overview or something that could be, like a harbor tour. I like calling it that because I feel like everyone wants to give people a tour, but it doesn't really address the use case problem.
Exactly.
Emmanuel actually asked a question here about producing content based on verticals. I think that's one aspect. I think verticals is a good place to start, but I think you can take it a step further. You can do use case specific. You can do persona specific. You can do brand specific. Like if you have a demo with a big brand, I always think of it like a Disney and you want to put characters in there. That's the customization and personalization that helps you tell your story that applies to that brand itself.
Yeah. And I mean, content based on vertical is huge, right? Like we used to have a demo instance and we had like a banking example because banking was one of our customers and we just kind of stole some great ideas of like the layout and everything. But then we go into an automotive company and they probably look at, watch the demo and they're like, meh, it's for a bank. So it's absolutely like just little things like being able to change your whole demo to not say, my fancy bank, but my fancy auto car company, whatever. Just like little things like that make a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And then like Kim said, on top of that, I would say the role-based content is what's going to be more key. And it continues to be so much more important in our sales cycles than I could have ever imagined, because people are less and less inclined to sit at the computer and learn something for a whole day and then figure out how it works for them. They want to know how it works for them based on the role that they play. So that's kind of what I'm really looking forward to. Hopefully, again, my whole point is about how can I take 5 people with completely different roles to leave my call and be like, oh, okay, I know what this is going to do for me, and the next guy knows what it's going to do for him as well. And that's huge, like if we can accomplish that.
I mean, I think you've hit so many points that a lot of people don't really think about until well into their sales career. So I'm glad that we're getting to chat today because I've even learned quite a bit from you. Any final takeaways on personalization, storytelling, anything, all of the above?
So I think there is one absolute truth that I can promise is accurate, is that telling stories is going to land bigger deals and it's going to help them expand faster. And that is an absolute truth. And the more stories you can tell and the more customers and the more people in a sale can envision using your product through a story, there's no question about it. You'll have more champions. You'll have the executives agree to bigger budgets, and I think that's my biggest learning lesson in myself over the past couple of years,
Yeah.
selling our product.
Yeah. I think you've hit on some points here, and some of the comments are also talking a bit about resources and just, time that it takes to do things like this. So I think that part of it is scale. That's the kind of scale why you were looking.
It does take time, but I will say, I'll leave everybody with one sentence, that the cost of not doing it can be much greater than investing the time to do it. And I know it's hard, and it's hard for us as well, but the cost of just letting things be as is can be, many, many 7-figure land deals, for instance, is how I think about it.
All right. I think that's it. So it's a wrap.